What's the problem with the CAA? Is there a problem at all? That's what we're going to deal with in this video, so stick around till the very end where we'll also look at the legal arguments. Now, do you remember Shaheen Bagh? These were the visuals. Muslim women, mostly, sitting out in protest that captured the attention of the entire country. They were protesting CAA and NRC. After that, COVID broke out and that protest had to be dismantled. And we sort of then got preoccupied with more immediate problems, like staying alive, for example. Now, 4 years later, after that law was actually passed in Parliament, it has come back because the government has now notified the rules. As of this week, on the 12th of March, the central government has notified the rules on how it plans to or how it will implement CAA that was passed back in 2019. Now, this is 4 years after it was passed, like I told you, and also just weeks ahead of the general election. Just days before the dates of the election will be announced, and the code of conduct comes into play when the government can no longer make any big announcements. Now, this notification has also come weeks after the Home Minister Amit Shah made a promise that CAA would be implemented before the Lok Sabha elections. Remember, it was one of the BJP's key election promises, along with the abrogation of 370 in Kashmir, the building of the Ram Mandir, and now CAA. There's also Uniform Civil Code, which is the only thing on that list that has not been checked off before the election. Now, let me tell you what the law says, and then we'll talk about why there's opposition to it. I'm going to read this off my laptop. Now, the law actually makes it easier for Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Buddhists, Jains, and Parsis, migrants from specifically 3 countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, to get Indian citizenship. The law is applicable to all migrants who arrived in India on or before the 31st of December 2014 and have lived in India for more than 6 years. Specifically, if you take a look at it, it seems fine, but it raises the question. Muslims seem to have been left out deliberately, and that is where the problem exists. Now, why this specific set of people that the government has designed this law for? The government argues that these people are religiously persecuted within their countries, and which is why India is making it easier for them to get citizenship in India. Now, if you talk about Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, they're all 3 of them are Muslim countries. And the argument then is there's no need to extend that sort of solace towards religiously persecuted people if they're Muslim, because they're unlikely to be persecuted in a Muslim country. So it's for the religious minority people living in that country. Now, let me take you through a statement made by the Prime Minister back in 2019 about this law, and it sort of gives us a clearer idea of what this entire thought construct is. He said, and I quote, "If the children of Ma Bharti or India are in trouble, isn't it the duty of India to take care of these children? Is it the color of the passport more important than the color of blood? Don't those separated by partition have a connection with Ma Bharati? There were mistakes done during the partition, and this bill will correct those mistakes," end quote. So the argument of the government is that there are people who got left on the other side after partition, and this is a way to offer them citizenship and effectively bring them back home. Now, let's take a look at what this law changes from the current law. Effectively, it changes 2 things. First of all, it relaxes the residential need requirements from 11 years to 6 years. Earlier, you had to have lived here for 11 years. Now, after 6 years, you can apply for citizenship. Secondly, for those who qualify from those religions in those countries, it also opens it up to illegal migrants and not just the legal migrants. Now, this is new because up till now, there was no provision for someone who illegally entered the country to apply for citizenship. Now it allows for that. Earlier, someone who illegally entered the country could have in fact been deported or were still sent to jail. The Intelligence Bureau on CAA has said that there are 30,000 immediate beneficiaries from this act once the implementation begins. In fact, when it started to be implemented, there were stories that the website crashed. And now let me take you through what the rules say. The rules basically have the entire procedure online. Applications have to be submitted online onto a particular website that I told you actually crashed when the announcement was made. Any document that shows that either the parents or the grandparents or even the great-grandparents of the applicant was from one of these countries is enough to prove their nationality. And proof of residence in India for 6 years doesn't need to be a visa because some of them are illegal. It can be a certificate issued by an elected member of that local body, which is close enough. A local certificate of the community is enough to establish religion as well. Now, while the CAA, says that this is open specifically to people who are facing religious persecution, nothing in the process actually asks for proof of that persecution. But applicants will have to give a declaration that they denounce their existing citizenship and that they want to, or they have an intent to make India their permanent home. Now, there are certain categories of India, including tribal areas in Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Tripura, and areas protected by the inner line, which protects tribal areas, which will be exempt from the CAA. So that's all of what has happened so far. Now let's talk about what the problem is and why there are issues or criticism to this law. Now, critics are calling this law anti-Muslim, saying that it will be used really to harass the Muslim population. Now, passing the law, remember, in 2019 brought out that entire protest nationwide that was spearheaded largely by students and women. Since the announcement as well earlier this week, there have been sporadic protests across the country. On the BBC, lawyer Gautam Bhatia actually says that this is the first time in the independent history of our country, that religion has been made any basis of citizenship. Remember, we're basically a secular country, which means that we've never based any law of gaining citizenship or losing citizenship in religion up until now. This will be the first time. And he said it's contrary to our long-standing secular constitutional ethos. The critics have also pointed out that if we are really intending on, protecting those who are facing religious persecution, then why have we left out the Ahmadis from Pakistan or the Rohingyas from Myanmar? In fact, the government has previously gone to Supreme Court and asked for the deportation of Rohingya refugees from India. So it's not really just about protecting those who are persecuted, but specifically about religion, and that is what has gained the most amount of criticism. Now, in response, what has our government said? These are the government statements. The government has consistently maintained that CAA is a law that gives citizenship. It will not take away citizenship. So it has said basically it will not affect the legal, democratic, secular rights of any Indian citizen, irrespective of your religion. It's also said so in the Supreme Court as well in 2022. Like I said, it says it's meant to give the citizenship and not take it away. More recently, after the law was notified yesterday, there was one story published by Al Jazeera in an article that claimed that CAA is fundamentally anti-Muslim. Now, the PIB, which is basically the government's press arm, put out a fact check and called this report misleading. Also, on the 12th of March, the Home Ministry released a press note titled, and I'm quoting, "Positive Narrative on CAA 2019. It answered 8 questions about the impact of CAA on Islam and Muslims, but it has been taken down since then. But before it was taken down, this is what it says, and I'm quoting, "Indian Muslims need not worry as CAA has not made any provision to impact their citizenship. It has nothing to do with the present 18 crore Indian Muslims who have equal rights as their Hindu counterparts. No Indian citizen will be asked to produce any document to prove his citizenship after this act," end quote. So fundamentally, the government arguing again that this will not affect any Indian citizen of India, Muslim or otherwise. So really, it's not discriminatory. Now, in order to fully understand where the criticism or the nervousness comes from, we need to step back and also look at NRC. Now, you'll remember also from the Shaheen Bagh days, these two things were mentioned together. In fact, those protests were about CAA, NRC together. Now, what is the NRC? The NRC is a National Register of Citizens. It's currently only applicable in Assam. So let's look at how it works in Assam. It is a register that is meant to list out every single Indian citizen, specifically in Assam, and to actually be able to sift through those who are Indian citizens and those who are migrants from outside or outsiders. Now, Assam has seen waves of migrations because it's a border state, specifically from Bangladesh, starting with the 1971 war. There have been a large number of people who've crossed over, and the people of Assam resent the fact that these people have diluted the culture, the language, basically the ethnicity of the state. They also put themselves on the electoral rolls. They are eating into the benefits that are meant for locals. Now, I must point out that in Assam specifically, the problem is not religious. It's insider versus outsider. And it's really those who have come in after 1971. And so the people of Assam don't really care about the religion of the people who've come in. They just want the outsiders segregated. So the solution in Assam was to make a list of all the citizens who already lived in the country before the war in 1971, and those people who couldn't prove that either their parents or their grandparents were in the country before that war. Those people who couldn't prove that would be called foreigners. Now, no work happened on this list until recently, and the list was actually then published in August 2019. There were a total of 3.3 crore applicants, but 19 lakh people were left off the list. Now, these people had to prove that they were in fact citizens, and that burden of proof was then on the applicant. They would be deemed either as foreigners or not as citizens, and they had to apply before a tribunal that was called complex, arbitrary, and routinely discriminatory. Once declared a foreigner, that person could be held in detention as well. So it was what was happening in Assam really that made everybody uncomfortable, because they connected the two things of CAA and of the NRC. There was a fear that the government would build a list, and the list would arbitrarily or by mistake or by error, because a comma was missing or a full stop was missing or the spelling of your name was different, leave people off the list. And if you were left off the list, then the CAA would prevent you from coming back onto the list if you were a Muslim. So that was roughly what people were afraid of. The Citizenship Amendment Bill would protect all of the non-Muslims who were not on the list. It would effectively be the Muslims who would be left out. This would effectively mean that tens of thousands of Bengali Hindu migrants who were not included in the NRC could still get citizenship and stay in Assam, but it was the Muslims who would face the repercussions. The fears, of course, were not unfounded. Remember, back in April 2019, there was this quote, this statement made by the Home Minister Amit Shah, who said, and I'm quoting, "Aap chronology samajh lijiye. First, we will bring in the Citizen Amendment Act. After that, we will bring in the National Register of Citizens. NRC will not only be for Bengal, but it will be for the entire country." End quote. It's that sort of mention that has not, to be fair, mentioned after that. That connection has not been made. NRC has not been drawn for the whole country, but just for Assam. But it is all of these things combined together that's making people uncomfortable. Now, how have the state governments reacted? Now, given there's an election around the corner, obviously, there's been a lot of political reactions. Immediately after the law was passed, the chief ministers of West Bengal, Punjab, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh announced that this was unconstitutional and would have no space in their states. Right now, the Chief Minister of Kerala has said CAA is an open challenge to humanity. Kerala will not implement. In Bengal, Mamata Banerjee has said this instigation is unwanted before the polls. We will not tolerate it. We will protest against it. In Tamil Nadu, the Chief Minister Stalin has said there's not going to be any use or benefit of CAA, which only paves way for creating divisions among Indian people. The stand of the state government is that this law is unwarranted and it must be repealed. Now, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh had protested earlier because they were Congress states. Since then, there's been a change. They are now BJP states, so there's no protest. In Assam, though, it's slightly more complicated. Now, remember, I told you Assam has a problem with outsiders and not the religion of the outsiders. So the Chief Minister, Hemanta Biswa Sarma, who is a very vocal BJP man, has actually said that he will be the first person to resign if one person who has not applied for the National Register for Citizens gets citizenship. So the Assam police, in the meantime, has issued notices to all opposition parties. They've been ordered to withdraw their hartal and not actually protest. But really, let's take a look at the legal arguments that I told you about in the beginning. Can the states do anything about it even if they disagree? Honestly, no, because when the government brought this in 2019, they brought it under the 7th scheduled union list. So it is really a national matter and not a state list or a state matter, so the states can't do much. The CAA has been challenged before the Supreme Court, first by the Muslim Union. Since then, 200 petitions have been filed and tagged along with that first petition, including by OAC, Jairam Ramesh, by Mahua Moitra, by the DMK, by the Assam Pradesh Congress Committee, and several others. The bench, which was led by Chief Justice U. Lalit and 2 others, passed an order saying that the final hearings will be held in December 2022. It hasn't happened yet. The Supreme Court has not heard the matter yet. But fundamentally, just because these petitions are pending before the Supreme Court does not prevent the government in any way from implementing its law or from bringing out these rules, because there's no stay on this law that was passed in 2019 by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has not said that you cannot implement it, or is not even begun hearing it right now. So the government is fully within its rights at this point to implement a law that has been passed by Parliament until such time as the Supreme Court either puts a stay on it or hears the whole thing, gives a verdict, and decides that it is in some way unconstitutional. Because remember, we have a fundamental right to equality in our country, which is Article 14, which basically says that the state shall not deny to any person equality before law or equal protection before the laws of the territory of India. So using religion as a qualifier could violate this fundamental act. That is the argument that most of these petitions are placing before the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court does in fact hear these arguments, if it decides to put a stay or call the law unconstitutional, then the law will have to be repealed. But for the time being, the government of India is fully within its rights to implement this law.